Okay, this meeting is being recorded. We are in the towards the end of chapter 38. If you're following along, it's the chitas that is marked for either the 6th of Nisan or the 26th of Adar. And we are talking about the role of kavana in the service of Hashem. So to recap and then to prepare ourselves to launching forward. Everyone can see this document on the screen with the chart. Okay, that's where we're going to be headed to today. So I'm going to leave it up there for a little bit. We have been discussing the role of kavana. Kavana, which is alternatively translated as intent, focus, purpose, objective, the emotional side that pairs up with the actual behavioral side, et cetera, et cetera, and its distinctive impact. So we have explained and emphasized that while we can appreciate for ourselves as human beings what it is that we like about kavana, when we feel a passion and an enthusiasm for the service of Hashem, what we have added here in Tanya is that the value of kavana is not only for the way in which it improves our behavior and puts a bounce in our step, it is because Hashem wants us to have that kavana. And perhaps to use a human analogy, if somebody is doing a kindness for you, they can do it begrudgingly, they can do it out of obligation, they can do it out of their own passion. And then there is this additional level when we are, in our context, serving Hashem, or in the analogous context, doing a kindness for another person. The benefactor, that is the person doing the mitzvah, has this enthusiasm because they know that the beneficiary, which in our case is Hashem, or in the analogy, it's the one for whom the favor is being done, finds it to be aligned, and we use the general word to be of pleasure, and again, not silly transient pleasure like cookies, but to be pleasurable, that the person is doing it with enthusiasm for them. Because the kavana, the enthusiasm, I love Shabbos, I really find it meaningful to study Torah, could be more about me than it is about Hashem. I like it. It's really interesting to me. It's really meaningful to me. Again, it's not a bad thing, but the Alter Rebbe did not write Tanya just for not bad things. The Alter Rebbe wrote Tanya in order to be in the alignment and the service of Hashem. So the message of I like it, it's good for me, it's meaningful to me, runs the risk of it being about the doer rather than it is about the one for whom it is done. And so the innovative point, which the Alter Rebbe has emphasized in the previous piece, is about how when we do mitzvahs, we do the mitzvah for Hashem, and the kavana is because Hashem values the kavana. Not just because when we have kavana, we have more, like I said, pep in our step and more enthusiasm. It is that when we have kavana, that is itself because Hashem wants us to have that kavana. With this sort of concept in mind, we are now, and this is one of the great gifts that Hasidus brings to us, is we try to put parameters, sort of like charts and handles onto concepts that are innately infinite, or like we might call them more spiritual and harder to grasp. So the Alter Rebbe has laid out for us a general principle that's not unique to Tanya, that all of creation can be categorized in 4 primary groupings. We have what is called in Hebrew domain, which is inanimate, rocks and dirt and so forth, doesn't even have any sign of life. It doesn't grow. So it does not have as profound, or almost sometimes doesn't even appear to have any sense of divinity within it, except the fact that it exists. So if there's rocks, there's got to be a rock maker. So it bespeaks the creation of Hashem because, again, if there's rocks, there's got to be a rock maker. Then you have a more profound level, which is that the the vegetable, the vegetative. So it grows, it has a sign of life. And that, again, further underscores that there is some power of life. So it's more demonstrative of the infinity of Hashem. Then you have the living being, the animals that roam around and live and even have some degree of personality. That much more. And then you ultimately have what is called really medaber, translated as speaker, which we call the human, which its distinctive quality of the human being is the power to recognize intellectually that there is more to life than myself, and to engage that intellect to transform my character and ultimately, of course, to result in changed behavior, that is, to be aware of something greater than myself, which is perhaps the most profoundly illustrative characteristic of the infinity of Hashem, that there's something more than me. Now, this model of the four basic groupings of all of creation is reflected in the characteristics of our mitzvahs and the kavanah, the blend that goes into both of them. The aspect that they are interactive, or not interactive, maybe not the right word. There are various degrees within our mitzvah performance. We can perform mitzvahs with the quality of the inanimate. We can perform mitzvahs in the quality of the vegetative, the animal, and the human, as we'll see in the description. So here we go. Misha daita yafa, one who's das. Now, when we say das, remember, although we may translate it simply as knowledge, which in English is trying to think of the word, is associated loosely with the concepts of intellect and generic academia. But when it comes to in Hasidus, it has a far more nuanced characteristic, and that is the ability or the quality of connecting the intellect to the heart. The whole school of Chabad is about how my intellect can overrule and ultimately transform and cure or mature my character. So if a person's das is strong, not just their intellect, not just that they can recite hundreds of pages of knowledge, and not even that they have great imagination, it's specifically the quality of das. And it's curious that the Alter Rebbe chooses the word yafa. Yafa, if you look it up in the dictionary, translates as the idea of beauty, of something that's beautiful. So why doesn't he say one whose das is strong, one whose das is developed? We don't commonly associate the characteristics of intellect with beauty. And so Chassidus explains that beauty is truly illustrated in the rhythmic combination of apparent disparate parts, like an orchestra, which is comprised of a variety of instruments. And when they cooperate and they play together, they create a beauty of blend, of interaction between each other. And so when the Alter Rebbe says that a person's das is yafa, it is underscoring this interactive characteristic between academia and character. Lidas es Hashem, to know God. We have mentioned this before. This is the opening line of Maimonides' book of law. Maimonides' biggest work is his Mishnah Torah, which is 14 volumes divided into 83 categories of every single law in Torah. Every law, even laws that are only applicable in the times of the temple, and for kings, for high priests, and so on. It predates the code of Jewish law, the Shulchan Aruch, and in that sense, its scope is far greater than the Shulchan Aruch. And the very first law, book 1, topic 1, chapter 1, page 1, law 1 is that it is an obligation to know Hashem. And of course, we push back and say, well, you can never know Hashem. Right, but it is the endless pursuit of the unattainable. We are continuously in pursuit of knowing Hashem. And again, that doesn't mean just that we can recite hundreds of descriptions and pages of Torah, although that's necessary too. It is that it becomes integrated within our intellect to the point that it has an impact on our character. And that's the whole key of Chabad, not just to have academic data. Ulehizbeining, and thus to analyze, that is to engage in an analytical quality, not just a recitation, like you're saying your times tables. 2 times 3 is 6. Well, what is 3 times 2? Well, how should I know? You just told me that when you say 2 times 3 is 6. That's information without analysis or understanding. So we're talking about lehizbeining. Ulahoilid, and again, what is the evidence? Proof is in the pudding of to where the quality or the impact of this knowledge has manifested itself in a manner that is godly, is that it produces, it begets, and it uses that offspring analogy, because Chachma is compared to the masculine and Bina to the feminine, and the product is the character, which is, again, this term ulaholid, which is to give birth, or to child, probably the best word. We don't really have a word for to give birth in Hebrew, but the root word there is the word for child. Mibinosoi, from this awareness. So again, it's not just the imagination, which is the key, the beginning, that there's something more than myself, and then it becomes analyzed. Yira ilah, a lofty level of yira. Just want to finish this idea, and then we'll come back to it in a moment. B'moichai, in the brain. Va'avas Hashem, and a love of Hashem, b'chalal hayimini shibaliboy, in the right quadrant of the heart. Liyos nafshay tzemei Hashem, and results in the soul thirsting for Hashem. Ladafka, to attach himself to Hashem. We'll come back to some of these, but I just want to get the sentence down. Aidei kiyat Torah mitzvahs, through the fulfillment of Torah and mitzvahs. Shehein, which are hamshachas va'aris orin seif baruch hu al nafshay, the drawing down of the infinite light of Hashem onto the soul, to attach himself to it. Ubekavana zoi, and with this objective, hu loimid umakayim ha-mitzvahs, he studies, he fulfills mitzvahs, v'chein bekavana zu mispalel umevarech, and with this he davens and he says brachas. Okay, we're going to come back to the sort of the beginning of this idea. Again, the very basic idea that we are very familiar with. Essentially, I guess we say it about every chapter in Tanya, which is a good thing. This is the whole essence of the message of Tanya, that a person can always control his intellect. That is, we can always control what it is that we contemplate, what it is that we speculate about, what it is that we focus our intellectual powers to. And when we will focus our intellectual powers on the infinity of Hashem, we will produce a reverence for God, and we'll talk about why reverence, which will result in a love for Hashem, and we'll talk about what the term love means. And that will stimulate a desire, and the Alter Rebbe uses this very emphatic word, a thirst to Hashem, which can only be and must be and will drive me to attach myself, to reach out, to quench that thirst, to fulfill its objective via the fulfillment of Torah and mitzvahs with kavana. And the kavana is that I long to be connected with Hashem. And this manifests itself in my study, my mitzvah fulfillment, and my davening. And those are divided up. Study and mitzvah fulfillment in one group, and then the Alter Rebbe interrupts that theme, and then adds that this kavana is also in my davening. So it's a lot of data going on there. Let's back up and sort of pick it apart. Hopefully everybody has the essential lesson, the sort of the flow of it, the basic point. And now we're going to analyze each of the words. So we begin again with the premise is that this is a person who is daita yafa. His knowledge is beautiful. His capacity for linking the intellect to the heart is harmonious. There is a synchronicity between the intellect and the heart. That's the person to whom we are addressing. We will also address the person who's not so much that way. Now, you may recall from way back when, the Alter Rebbe talked about this idea where, on the one hand, we demand from everybody to be a Beinoni. On the other hand, do you expect me to be perfect? No, just always think, say, and do the right thing. That is within our control. It is always within our control to focus our attention, to control our verbal outbursts and our behaviors. What about the internal link where we think it, feel it, do it? So the Alter Rebbe taught us way back in, like, I don't know, chapter 14 or something, I don't remember, that part is kind of out of our control. That is an innate skill that some people have and others don't. Yes, we can improve upon it. Like many natural skills, whether it's musical or it's athletic, there are people who have a naturally pleasant voice. They have a natural rhythmic character. Yes, they have to work very hard to develop it so that they can play the piano and sing beautifully. And then there are other people who don't have that natural talent. Torah does not focus us on results, meaning there is no mitzvah to be a scholar. The mitzvah is to study Torah. Whether or not you'll become a scholar is a little bit out of our hands. And this is another core point that we recognize in Hasidus, that we're all about the process and not about the product. And we acknowledge that each individual has different character traits and characteristics. We're not all cookie cutter replicas, and we can't all do everything. Just like we're not all capable of singing beautifully or running fast, et cetera, et cetera. So the first person we're dealing with here is the one who is daita yafa. And again, even if I say, well, I'm not that, that doesn't match up with my talent base. Still, I can learn from it. Again, I don't have to be Beethoven, but I can learn from Beethoven. So somebody posted a question here. Does that mean that it still counts if we learn Torah and we don't know what we are learning? Now, when we use the word counts, we mean, is it still a mitzvah? The simplest answer is yes. And I'll give you an illustration. I know it's for men and not for women, but you've observed everyone can get an aliyah. So a person comes up to the Torah. They can't even read the Hebrew. We have to repeat after me, Baruch Hu es Hashem HaMvarach. So why are they able to get an aliyah? What are they making a bracha about? They're not even able to understand. Forget they can't even read the words. They don't even understand them. Because there is a value in the recitation. It's associated with another characteristic we're familiar with, reciting Tehillim. We recite Tehillim in Hebrew. There is a value. Is there also a value in understanding? Yes. What the point that we're emphasizing here is not just about whether there's even basic understanding. We would say, or we emphasize, that the value is in Torah study, even if I don't become a scholar. Meaning, what's the point of going to medical school if I'm not going to be able to become a doctor? Right? We would say there isn't really much value in that. The point of going to medical school is to become a doctor. The point of going to yeshiva school is not to become a scholar. Told the story before about this man. He comes from a long line of rabbanim and great scholars. When he was 19, he really did some self-analysis, and he was pretty disappointed. And he wrote this letter to the Rebbe, and he sent the same letter to a different great Jewish leader about how disappointed he is. You know, he hears about the Alter Rebbe wrote the Shulchan Aruch at 19 and so on. And the Rebbe's response was, your job is to study Torah. It doesn't say anywhere in the Torah, thou shalt be a scholar. Thou shalt be an author of great insights and books. We don't say, well, you go to yeshiva because you're going to be great. It's not about the accomplishment, it's about the process, because again, you think about an interpersonal relationship, when we understand that studying Torah is the method through which we become close with Hashem. So how close? It's not an end game. Okay, I have now become close enough and I'm finished. It's the endless pursuit of the unattainable. So within the context here, the Alter Rebbe is first addressing himself to the one who is Daitoi Yofa. He has this strong, harmonious synchronicity between the intellect and the character. That is how that is the first sort of subject. And so when he thinks about the infinity of Hashem, and it's important that we use that word. The Hebrew word is ligdulasai, which may be translated as greatness. The problem with the limitation of the word greatness is this is great, that's really great. It starts to become a competitive thing. That's a big hill, that's a mountain, that's the tallest mountain, the biggest building, et cetera, et cetera. What Chassidus means with this term, bigdulasai, is infinite. And infinity is not just that we can't ever grasp it, but it's the endless pursuit. It's not about getting to some point. And again, just like it is in an interpersonal relationship, it's not about getting to some degree and saying, okay, now I am done. Now I know this person fully and completely, and our friendship can therefore be over. It's about the endless pursuit of it. As a result, again, the holy, that childbearing metaphor or simile or analogy, I always forget which one is which, that from the Bina, you will have Yira Ilah. Now, Yira Ilah translates as the higher level or the upper fear of Hashem. So first of all, we have to talk about what is the idea of fear of Hashem and what's lower and what's upper. Now, higher and lower, although those are the accurate translations, it's somewhat, again, contextually different, because in the secular usage, when we say something is higher and lower, so when we get to the higher, we discard the lower. We no longer need the lower. But in Torah and the Chassidus, it's not like better and worse. It's different stages focused on different characteristics. So everybody wants to have both the, quote, lower fear and higher fear. So higher should not be confused with better. And it's an important distinction, because, again, if I'm in the higher level math, I don't go to the lower level math. But in Torah and Chassidus, higher fear still incorporates or still involves what is otherwise referred to as the lower level. So let's talk about what those are. So fear, again, has the characteristic, it's a spectrum. On the one hand, it is true that there is a value to the fear of punishment. If I don't do what I'm supposed to do, I'm going to get punished. Either it's a very shallow level of punishment that I'm not getting ice cream for dessert, or it's a more profound level, but still that I'm not going to be associated. I'm going to be what we might call in English left out. I'm not going to be aligned with Hashem. Everybody is busy, involved in making and doing and working and so on, and I'm standing on the side and I am voluntarily disassociated. So Yira can be the fear of consequence, the fear of severance of the relationship with Hashem, and a more profound level is an awareness of the infinity that creates a sense of awe. Now, we talk about this a lot. Of course, in Chabad, we're much more into the love of Hashem than we are into the fear of Hashem. We love, and we don't talk so much about the fear, but we are reminded that we need both wings. You think about this again in any interpersonal relationship. Love without reverence becomes smothering. When we treat others with only love and no reverence, then we completely consume them, and that's unhealthy. So there needs to be a sense of distance. We never get palsy-walsy with Hashem. There's always this sense of awe and reverence and so on. We never get chummy. That's this quality of Yiri Ilah. Again, when I recognize that there is the infinity of Hashem, and if a person is Daito Yafa, to the point that he has an emotional reaction. Look, two people could go and hear very moving music, see very brilliant artwork, hear great intellectual teaching, and one person is extraordinarily moved by it and uplifted and brought to tears, and the other one is like, that's nice, and not in a disrespectful way, and not even because he doesn't appreciate how complex it is for this music or art. Myself, I don't understand these things. Okay, it's very difficult. That's like, this is the greatest lacrosse player. Okay, I'm not against it, but it doesn't move me. Why? Because it's not daita yafa. It's intellectually, I can tell you how difficult it was and how complex it was, but it doesn't move me. So we're talking about one who is daita yafa, and as a result of this, he produces. And again, there's a laborious quality. One of the core points of Tanya is exactly this idea. It does take work, and we build up love through work, through toil, through effort. Meaning, there is a perception that either you got it or you don't got it. That having faith in Hashem, having love for Hashem, having awe from Hashem is like being left-handed. If you're born that way, you're born that way. If not, not. Torah does not, Chassidus does not take that theory. Something works for me, it doesn't work for you. I tried it, I don't like it. No different than music. I mean, we have this sort of fantasy that the person sits down, they play the piano, they start to sing, etc. Yes, there is a certain natural disposition, and then it requires a lot of development. And that is in part what the Alter Rebbe is underscoring here with the birthing metaphor. The moichet begins in the intellect. And again, because the core theme of Tanya is we can always control what we concentrate on. So we can engage our intellect to imagine that there is something of the infinite. It is beyond my ability and my awareness. And that is only accessible through the intellect, through the imagination. And then that results in Avas Hashem, in a love of Hashem. Mind rules the heart. In the sort of secular perspective, again, either you got it or you don't. Either it speaks to you or it doesn't. I went to shul, it was boring. I learned Torah, it didn't move me. I heard the music, I ate matzah, and so on. There are key, and this was the original audience of the Alter Rebbe. Remember, the Alter Rebbe's original audience were people who were learning Torah and doing mitzvahs and keeping kosher and making brachas and had mezuzahs and tefillin and matzah. And yet they weren't feeling an emotional connection to Hashem. And the Alter Rebbe's response was the intellect will stir that desire and that sense of love for Hashem. And as a result, when the person engages his intellect and he recognizes it in his he perceives it, or he senses it better in his emotion, in the right side where there's a natural alliance. Remember, in the heart the heart is the seat, the home field for the animal soul. So in order to impact the heart, there has to be effort made by the intellect to stir up the right side of the heart. It results in the soul thirsting for Hashem. The opposite is a little bit easier to illustrate. There is an interpretation that Adam and Chava are in Gan Eden. They have everything they could ever want, and they're perfectly content. The snake comes along and says, you think you have everything you want? Your neighbor has a Ferrari. Oh, really? Now I'm miserable. Or like Steve Jobs said, we took something nobody ever wanted, and now we can't live without it. So that's in the negative. In the positive, it's the same idea. A person might say, well, I don't want that. I don't want to be thirsting for Hashem. I just want to be content. And again, maybe I'm being a little silly in my illustration of it, but there is a certain attraction to being bored. It's fine. Everything's fine. Everything's fine. I've told this story before that the great Chassid, Mendel Futterfass, first came to America after his efforts to rescue Jews and the sufferings in Soviet labor camps. He lived in Eretz Yisrael, and he came to America. When he returned, they said to him, "Nu, Mendel, what do you say about these American Jews?" And they expected him to say something disparaging, these couch potatoes, like they used to call that phrase, these Amerikanska chocolaten, They're all a bunch of chocolate eaters and so on. And he said, in America, good, they're all good. And people were like surprised. They said, really? He says, yeah, you ask somebody, how's your davening? It's good. How's your learning? Good. How you doing? I'm good. Everything's good, good, good. Where's the passion? Where's the enthusiasm and so on? But there's a certain temptation. I just want everything to be good. Basically, don't bother me. And the pushback is that this will drive us to a tzameya, to a thirst for Hashem. And that thirst can only be addressed, almost ironically, by attaching myself to Hashem through the fulfillment of Torah and mitzvahs. Because when I do that, I am, in fact, bringing the infinite light of Hashem onto my soul, if that is my kavanah. So again, imagine the original audience of Tanya, people who are doing Torah and mitzvahs. They're learning and they're davening and, mezuzahs and matzahs and the whole package. And they come to the Alter Rebbe and they say, I don't feel a passion. I don't feel close to Hashem. I feel like I'm going through the motions. I don't really feel like it's happening. So the Alter Rebbe says, engage the intellect to see the infinity of Hashem. That will have an impact on the ally you have, which is the right side of the heart. Remember the metaphor we talked about much earlier in Tanya, that the heart allows the blood to come in. And then it pumps out life-giving blood. So to pump out life-giving is the godly side, because it's sustaining the rest of the body. To receive the blood, which is already sort of all worn out and needs to be reoxygenated. We're not studying biology here. That's not our point. So the heart innately reacts to things. I see it, I want it, my heart beats faster. Little boy, have some magic beans, and he's lunging for it. The right side of the heart is where that oxygenation takes place, which is about giving, not about receiving. And then the person gets all excited. Okay, now I'm all excited. Well, I'm going to dance. And I said, whoa, you're all excited? Do a mitzvah. But I've been doing the mitzvahs all along. Yeah, but you've been doing them because it's your obligation. Now, or you're doing it because you love it. You're doing it because it makes you feel. Now, do it purely for Hashem. That's the kavanah that we're emphasizing. Do it purely for Hashem. Okay, I love doing things for Hashem. Well, I love doing things for Hashem is still about me. Have a passion for it when you're doing it for Hashem. Perhaps an analogy that we can think of is if you're playing with a child. So hopefully, I don't like playing toys. If I do, that's another issue. But I love playing with my child. And my child wants me to be all into it, because if I'm half distracted and on my phone, not me, of course, there's no kavanah there. The kavanah is when I am fully engaged in the game, completely, totally, and utterly. Fully engaged in the game, not just going through the road thing. What do you mean? I played with you. I sat on the floor and we played for 2 hours. Yeah, but you're not present. Okay, I really love playing this game. Well, now you're doing it for yourself. Or am I doing it in the service of Hashem? That kavanah will now be expressed in the mitzvahs. That will get you that achievement. That will get you what you are seeking. Not because you didn't do the mitzvahs before, but the mitzvahs were being done because I loved it. So if I'm doing because I love it, why do I think it's going to create a closeness with Hashem? Again, we've used this example before. It's like the person goes to the doctor and the doctor says, oh, good, I really want to do this operation. Oh, and you need this operation. Whoa, why? What's wrong? Because my concern is he doesn't really think I need the operation. He wants to do the operation. So he's looking for somebody. And it doesn't mean he's being deliberately dishonest, but his perspective is skewed by his personal desire to do this operation. Is he really truly focused on me for what I want and what's best for me? And that's how he does mitzvahs. And then the Alter Rebbe adds, and again, he sort of offsets it and says, and also with this kavanah does he daven and do brachas. So those are the verbal mitzvahs. So I definitely switched to the share screen. And again, we see that these are two types of behaviors, the action mitzvahs and the verbal mitzvahs. Now, in our parallel, and again, one of the gifts of Hasidus is to create this kind of chart system. we're using a familiar term, which is the four categories of creation: inanimate, vegetable, a living, animal, and medaber, communicator, or human. So now we've talked about the deeds that are inanimate. That's the action mitzvahs. They're just behaviors. And the verbal mitzvahs like davening and brachas. It's actually this week's parsha. The mitzvah of saying a bracha after eating is in this week's parsha. Those are like the vegetative. Again, you see a person sitting in the sukkah. It doesn't look like he's doing anything all that fantastic. You see a person or you hear a person saying a bracha. It's a little bit more evident. So the action mitzvahs, like again, sitting in the sukkah, are not so immediately demonstrative of something of holiness, unless you understand the context. The vegetative, that is the verbal, he's saying a bracha, he's saying the davening, there's a little bit more evidence of the godly characteristic, like there's a little more evidence of godliness in the tzomeach, that's the Hebrew, which translates as that which grows. We call it vegetative, but more literally it means that which grows. So here the Alter Rebbe, back in the text, so when a person has this type of awareness, when his intent, when his kavana, now I highlight this, let's see if it works. Come on, there we go. Now I'm really going to be impressed with me. When a person has this type of awareness, that their thought is about how it serves Hashem, and that they are doing it because it serves Hashem, and that their enthusiasm is because Hashem likes enthusiasm, not about me at all. This is like the distinctive quality of the human who can engage his imagination to recognize that there is something besides myself. It's not about me at all. So the behaviors are like the inanimate and the vegetative, like mitzvah actions and the verbal mitzvahs, and the person who we're talking about here, who's got this called high level daita yafa, this beautiful harmonious das, his kavana is the distinctive human capacity to imagine there's something other than myself. The basic difference between an animal and a human, look, you can train an animal to do certain behaviors. And essentially, you pardon the analogy, that's what we do with human beings. You train a child that if he says please, he gets what he wants. If he does his homework, he does well on tests and he gets patted on the head and he gets a bike. And if he goes to school and he works hard, he'll get paid. And if he gets paid, he can buy better things. And it is essentially no different than training an animal. Again, it's a very harsh analogy. That classic, what do you want more than anything else in the world? Now figure out a way to get it. Don't you want to have a house and a car when you grow up? Well, the only way to do that is to get a job. And the only way to do that is to work hard in school. And I'm not even against it. That quality is like an animal. You are training them to act out on their instinctual intent. This is what they instinctually desire, stuff, basically. And the way to get stuff is to comply with certain behaviors. What we have talked about is the distinctive quality of the human being, which is the ability to go beyond themselves, to get beyond just my own awareness of what I can see in front of me. That's good for the person who's daita yafa, who's got, again, this high-level capacity. I don't know if high level is even fair, but he's got this capacity for an intellect to impact the heart. I think it, I feel it, I do it. Umi shadaita ksara. What about somebody who doesn't have such a beautiful capacity? Their das is called short. Short in that, now I switch from sharing to this is a visual, my intellect doesn't reach down to my heart. I know potato chips are bad for me, but I still eat them. My intellect doesn't have that degree of impact. I feel badly. I eat less, but I'm still eating them. So it's not just about the intellect. To think about the infinity of Hashem, because it's a hard concept. It's so unnatural. That will even create, and you see here, the Alter Rebbe puts the love first. Earlier, we talked about the fear leading to the love, the intellect ruling the heart. Here, the Alter Rebbe says that the person struggles to come up with the awareness, to stir up the awareness of the infinity of Hashem that would lead them to have a desire to be attached with Hashem. Remember, since, as we said, yira, fear, is the fear of separation, and ava is the passion for connection, to be aligned. And here's what the Alter Rebbe is saying. This person doesn't have that capacity. It's not for a lack of trying. It's not because he's lazy. We're not campaigning for mediocrity. He doesn't have that ability. And again, it's not a yes, no, it's a spectrum. And we should be cautious not to take the ego and say, oh, well, that's me. You can't expect me to do it. This is for other people. This is for holy people and scholars and people who come from different life circumstances. The Alter Rebbe is not buying that. Even the emotional response in the intellect, not just the academic awareness of the infinity of Hashem, he is again struggling with even creating anything beyond his intuitive sense of desire to be close with Hashem. We're going to come back to this in a moment. What is he always able to do? He remembers. And again, we're going to review this in a moment. And he can kickstart what is already there. And that's going to be the crucial distinction, as we'll see. The innate, natural love that everybody has, it's the way you come out of the factory, we'll talk about it, that can sometimes become hidden in the heart. And he can discharge it from the hidden confines of the heart, that it should be revealed, at least intellectually. That the will, the passion in his mind, and the depths of his heart should be maskim umisratze beritzoy gamar be'emes lamitoi, that he should desire and be compliant and truly wish, truly to truly, which we'll talk about, limsar nafshe be'peil mamish, to surrender his soul, literally, ayichad Hashem, for his unification with Hashem. We're going to talk about all of these terms. That he should attach his godly soul and all of its means of expression, the garments, and to subsume them into the singularity and this unity, which is God's desire, embedded in the study of Torah and the fulfillment of mitzvahs. I know it's a lot of data, so let's recap here, and we'll go through some the specifics and analyze the words. Here, the Alter Rebbe is now going to be talking about, as I, share screen. I'm going to be impressed with my techno savvy. The person who, and you'll forgive the analogy with the word animal. Animal is not bad in this context. We have a fundamental premise that we have pounded home since the beginning of Tanya. Every Jew, simply by the fact this is what makes them Jewish, whether they are aware of it, whether they act upon it, whether they identify with it, has an actual part of Hashem that is embedded within their identity. That's how you come out of the factory. Ipso facto, just as every child has an innate desire to be connected with their parent, even if they never knew their parent, even if, God forbid, they had a bad experience with their parent, they still retain the desire to be associated with the parent. That is innate. Just as every creation has a tendency towards going back to its origin, decaying back to its origin, breaking down to its fundamental elements. Every Jew has that. That level of desire to be connected with Hashem is called the natural love. Now, when we say love, we don't mean I love it like it's my favorite thing, like I love swimming or I love cookies or I love my country. We mean a desire to be associated therewith. That's what love means in this context. It's the elementary level of love. And it's intuitive. It's there. Just like everybody wants to be healthy. Nobody wants to be sick. And the body is naturally predisposed to health, which is why the body naturally rejects unhealthy things. It's why a person coughs at their first cigarette. Why? Because the body says, I don't want this. What can happen? We can override it. The body rebels against unhealth unless we keep pounding cupcakes, and then the body gets beaten down. Every Jew wants to be connected with Hashem. That is our premise. Excuse me, sorry, you Jewish? Yes, you want to put on phone. That's what you want. Don't tell me what I want, right? The doctor tells you your body wants more vitamin C. Don't tell me. I don't want to have more vitamin C. I don't want more rest, et cetera, et cetera. And then we override the body's natural desire for health, with whether it's potato chips or staying up too late, et cetera, et cetera. Now, what happens? We might therefore say that if a person says, I love Hashem, it's like a child says, I love my parent. It's a good thing, but it doesn't feel like it's much of an accomplishment. How have I added any value to say I love Hashem? That's the way you came out of the factory. And if I gave my financial advisor $100 to invest for me, and after 120 years, he says, here's the $100. I say, well, what did I need you for? Well, here's $100. What do you mean? I gave you that $100. That's what I gave you. You haven't contributed any value. And so, in a sense, I've lost value because I wasted all this time. So we might feel like, well, if all I can say is I love Hashem after 120 years, I haven't done anything of significance. Not so fast, the Alter Rebbe says. That since we are not a single entity of only the godly soul, we also have the self-serving soul, that impulse for buy me, take me, get me. I want to be alive. I want for myself, which isn't evil, but it's not godly. It doesn't only want bad things. It just wants self-serving things. And this impulse is so powerful that it often squashes my intuitive love of Hashem. If I can stimulate that love for Hashem, and I can get it to be active and take it out from hiding, at least intellectually, that I should then be compliant with it, I have in fact done something quite remarkable. Back to my health analogy. We take a premise that every body, the body itself, naturally desires to be healthy. So why is it that it's so rare that you have adults who are fully healthy? Since it's only natural to be healthy, and the body rejects unhealthy behaviors. So why is it that people are not, quote unquote, all healthy? Now, again, there can be extreme circumstances, but that's not generally the case. We have access, thank God, to clean air and clean water and basic nutrition. So why are there so many people who are unhealthy? And why do we have reverence for a person who is simply, quote unquote, normal? Healthy. Why? Because although it's only natural, the competition against all the unhealthy behaviors is so profound that if we can maintain that natural intuitive desire for health, it is an accomplishment. To which the Alter Rebbe says, or makes this same point, that if we can sustain and engage the intuitive love for Hashem to push away to the point that it will do what it is most naturally aligned to do, which is to be most naturally inclined to do, which is to be aligned with Hashem, regardless, even if it means that they have to give up their physical life. Again, quote unquote, even though this is natural, and generally speaking, nature is the starting point, and our job is to add value, this itself is a great accomplishment and should not be undervalued, that the person is able to at least have the basic level of desire for health. I still want potato chips, but I don't eat the potato chips, even if it means, and again, you think about this, again, not in the drama of literal going to the death. Think about this in a more micro circumstance. The child who doesn't participate in the misbehavior and it's social suicide. And we say, well, if you don't do that, all the fun kids are not going to play with you if you don't engage in this behavior. or you're going to be seen as the teetotal or a goody two shoes, and you're going to miss out on all the fun. And yet the person says, but my commitment to the infinity of Hashem, or to my desire to be healthy, my body's innate natural desire, and therefore I'm going to bypass the unhealthy, socially, morally, ethically, biologically unhealthy behavior, even though it appears at the moment to be at risk of surrendering my very stature. This is, in fact, although it's compared to the animal, and again, in this context, we don't mean animal as in aggressive or nasty. We mean natural, intuitive. And again, we have a very hesitant relationship. I mean, in the secular world, we like nature because the alternative to nature is sort of phony, plastic, polyester. In Kedusha, nature is what Hashem does. Our job is to turn nature into art. And if we're just writing out the nature, we may feel like we have an added value. But again, it's just like being naturally healthy. Being naturally healthy is much more of an accomplishment than just doing what comes naturally, because we got cupcakes bombarding us from every corner of the world. And then even though I don't feel this sameya, this thirst, like we talked about the person who was Daita Yafa, who had this capacity to blend their imagination with their character and result in their behavior. And this person is, and I use this term in heavy quotes, only acting out of their natural propensity, yet they have added value by stirring up that natural propensity. They have added value by engaging in that natural propensity to uplift it. And then they will act out on it, even at the risk of forfeiting, whether it's social or even literal lives. And they manifest this in their Torah study and their fulfillment of mitzvahs. It's almost as if they say to Hashem, I want to expand upon it, but I'm not capable, but I give to you all that is mine, all that is my basic identity. And I'm overcoming all the distractions to do so. The Gam Hayira Klulaba, and this includes also reverence, L'kabel Malchusai, to accept God's authority. Not to rebel against him. And it's this awareness, the awareness of my desire to have a desire. I want to be so close with Hashem for Hashem's sake. I want to do it for him. Who saw Merah, he avoids evil. He does good, not because he wants to so much, and not because I'm afraid of the consequence, but because Hashem wants me to do it. And again, it's a lot harder than it sounds. I mean, to truly be able to do something for another person without any sense of why I want to do it, because it makes me feel good and I'm the good one, and et cetera, et cetera. V'loi made, and to then study Torah. Again, not because I'm pursuing a PhD. It's because this is how I can this is what Hashem wants. I fell into the trap there myself. I'm doing because this is what Hashem wants me to do. Umispalel and daven, because Hashem wants me to daven, not because I need things. That too. But Hashem wants that. Umavarech, beperush amilos levadai. Beloi dechila berechimu, be'eskalsli b'moichai. And again, my capacity is simply to recite the words and to know their basic translation, and simply to know what I'm saying. And I don't have this revealed reverence and love in my heart and in my mind. I don't, because I am again, and I don't mean this term as insulting as it sounds, like the animal. It acts out of its instinct. This is like a soul that bespeaks godliness like the animal bespeaks godliness. Maybe in our society, we have a greater appreciation for animals and to the majesty and so forth of the animal. And again, commonly we use the term animal as a disparaging term. Here, we're using it as a greater awareness of Hashem. Just like when we look at an animal, we have a greater awareness of Hashem than we look at a tree, and even more so than at a rock. So again, it is a exalted level of awareness of Hashem. Like when I see an animal, I'm aware. I mean, that's why we step on the grass, and hopefully we are more gentle with animals. That an animal, again, it's not driven by its intellect. And again, I'm not. I am making that effort. And again, it's not an excuse. It's not a campaign for mediocrity. It is, however, limited. And it is all of my character that I avoid, again, just like natural health, things which are damaging, which are harmful, and a desire for things which are beloved. And again, they're only natural. And that sounds very disparaging. When we think, though, however, of how many people are healthy as their nature is, not too many. Why? Because even though, quote unquote, it's only our nature, and therefore we are pre-programmed and predisposed towards it, it is still an accomplishment in contrast to the bombardment of all the polyunsaturated fats. And it's not coming in with this person out of his bina and his das, from his his analysis and his application. And again, this is that quality that every Jew is born with. It's part of your natural packaging. You have a desire to be aligned with Hashem and a fear of being detached from Hashem. That's the way you come out of the factory. They are all an inheritance from our forefathers. We call them the fathers because fathers beget children. Just as apple trees produce apples, Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov produce Abraham's, Yitzchak's, and Yaakov's. Not maybe to the same degree, but if you knew that this was Beethoven's son, you'd probably want him to play piano at your bar mitzvah more than just some random person. Why? Because there's a natural progression and expression from one to another. So the Avos, who had a total, completely selfless love and fear of Hashem, we have at least an intuitive love and fear of Hashem. That's the way we come out of the factory. And do not underestimate its value, because even though it is, quote, natural, it is still an accomplishment to keep that nature present and engaged in defense against the overwhelming bombardment of antagonism, of competition for other things that, quote unquote, appear more lovable and more frightening. So when they, God forbid, put the sword to his throat, that really looks scary. The infinity of Hashem doesn't look as scary. And when we can have the awareness of, I'd rather be close with Hashem and detached from my physical, or like the kid, I'd rather keep up my ideal than participate in this misbehavior, even though it means, quote unquote, social isolation, etc. This is, in fact, a great accomplishment that should not be underestimated. So again, back to our little chart here, which I'm pretty proud of, as you could probably tell. In the deeds, there are deeds that are like actions, that are like the action deed, mitzvahs, are like the inanimate, person sitting in the sukkah doesn't immediately bespeak infinite godliness. Then there is like the vegetative, just like the plant, that's a little bit more obviously godly because it has life to it. That's like the verbal mitzvahs. The person is davening, saying brachas, etc. It's a little bit more obviously godly. And on the kavanah side, there is the animal level of kavanah. And I know that sounds really bad. It's not intended to be disparaging. And it suggests the idea that it is instinctual, unless we think, well, it's just instinctual. So what have I added? It's no different than giving the guy back his $100 after 100 years. And the answer is no, because the statistics still seem to suggest that my instinctual love for Hashem is going to be bombarded by the pursuits and the distractions of all these other competing characters. And then there is the human, which is the capacity to go beyond my instinct, to engage the intellect, not through data, not because I can read 50 more pages of the Talmud. It's because I can engage that imagination to get beyond myself. And it's not either or, it's a spectrum. And in some areas, we're more acting out of our intuitive without having to think about it, which has got that quality. And then there's others where we engage our intellect and we overcome our proclivities and sanctify it in that sense, in the service of Hashem. All right. We'll conclude here. Next week, we'll pick up the next chapter. Everyone should have a good week, and we'll see you next Avach.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Great. Have a good week, everybody.